as we're on session number 2, I'm starting off kind of in a similar place to where we left in the last one, in that I've got another one of these classic with a slight sort of contemporary twist, these Cary Grant, transatlantic, Anglo-American, whatever you want to call them, sort of gins. So this is, but this is an English gin, and it is just coming around. And this is Warner Edwards gin, which is made in Harrington in Northamptonshire. It's 44% ABV, and like the, thank you very much, and like the Sipsmith, it has, thank you. Like the Sipsmith, it has a barley base. Has someone not got one? Okay. So you've got juniper, coriander, angelica, lemon, cardamom, cinnamon, black peppercorns, elderflower, and again 2 mystery botanicals on this one. But I think once again you're getting this, you know, the juniper's there and there's the citrus, but there's a lot of the spice comes through. I think you get the black peppercorns and the cardamom and the cinnamon, and there's a slight juiciness, I think, that seems to, that always reminds me of sort of elderflower, elderberry, that comes through. They also make a sloe gin and an elderflower infused gin as well, in addition. I think that the use of the barley base on this one, with its slightly sweeter, some of those sort of vanilla notes come through, means that it works very nicely with the spice botanicals. I think it's a good example of how the base spirit and the choice of botanicals, depending on what direction you're going into, can really fit nicely together. And as I was talking about, and we've been talking about water again, this comes from a spring that's on their farm. So it's a very small village, Harrington, and the distillery's sort of up on the hill. Then there's the main road that goes through the village, and then there's these steeped slopes that go down, and then the spring is at the bottom. And these terraces, they're man-made. It's from a medieval manor house, and these terraces were the gardens. So they have to sort of go down to the bottom and pick up the water. And apparently there's a ghost as well. So, but it does illustrate the point that I was making again, that the water source, I think, is quite possibly as much a point of, although water is important in terms of, we get it exactly from here or from there, I think it's as much marketing as it is part of the flavour. So that's this one.
Sorry, can you just give us the botanicals?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. So the botanicals again are juniper, coriander, angelica, lemon, and then cardamom, cinnamon, black peppercorns, elderflower, and then there's two mystery botanicals. One of them is a spice. That's about as much as I can say. But so you have got, it is slightly more down that spicy route, but I think you still got the balance. I mean, we're going to move on to some gins that are very much more sort of focused on a particular viewpoint. So we've got, and what do people think of this one? I'm just interested because I really like this one. This is one I really like, but I didn't know. Yeah, and see, I would put that down to the base spirit. I think that provides some of the, yeah.
It comes together very well.
They have, when we get round to doing it, they have agreed to put their money where their mouth is, and we are going to do an experiment with their gin with a variety of different water sources. So it should be interesting, and then I shall publish the results. So that's I think kudos to them for doing that. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, I'll leave alive. I don't know. Okay, so. The next one we've got coming around is Short Cross Gin, which, has anyone tried this before? No, I didn't think, because it's very, very new. This is Northern Ireland's first craft gin distillery. I met it's from the Radamon estate in Northern Ireland. I met the couple that make it last October at the Craft Distilling Expo that we organised in London, so like a trade show for distillers, essentially. and I did a sort of sat down with them one-on-one session to give them some feedback. So it's really nice to finally have the final product here. They wanted to they were talking about sort of defining an Irish style. That's kind of where the angle they're coming from, because before now, really, Cork was the main sort of Irish gin. There are a few other craft ones which are also very good, and so here we go. Thank you. So this one is a wheat base. They distill it on the site. It's an estate. They showed me some pictures. There's this big manor house, and I said, well, what's the manor house used for? And I thought they'd say, oh, well, it's for, National Trust owns it. People can go around like many sort of state homes and stuff. But no, that's where they live. So I was kind of surprised at that. This has a mix of classic botanicals, but they've also gone slightly down the Celtic route, and this isn't completely what's in there, but it does include juniper, coriander, lemon, orange, and cassia, classic. Then they use fresh apples, elderberry, and wild clover as well. And I think it's the wild clover that adds quite a lot of those slightly sort of herbal notes and things like that you're getting. I don't know exactly what it tastes like on its own, but that seems to be what we're getting there. You also, I think, there's, like I was saying before with the elderflower and the Warner Edwards, there's a nice juiciness and there's a freshness, and I think that comes through with the apple as well. It works really nicely in long drinks, stands up very, very well to a lot of different flavours. And they have as I said, they have a well on their estate, which is where they get their water from as well. So this is very, very new. A couple of weeks it's been out, but a treat to try it with you. So. It does bring up the interesting question of having these regional styles and things like that, and who indeed decides this sort of thing. And I guess it's almost sometimes I think it's probably decided by the person that comes out first. We did do a tasting a few years back of Scottish gins to see if there was a definitive Scottish style. I know we have a lot of Scottish distillers here, and we sort of concluded at the time that there probably wasn't, although there was some potential for some. But I think probably that will gradually change, and maybe a style will emerge. We need to do another tasting, I think. We had about 12, but a lot of them were still in the very classic style, like Old Raj and the Cadenhead stuff and things like that. So yes, excellent. Right, we've got the next one coming around. Feedback on the short cross. What do people think of that one? Yeah, again, it's another one. All of these are ones that I really like. I didn't say the ABV because I didn't write it down. It's 46 is the ABV on that. So, moving on. I know we're rushing. We're going through a bit, but I've got a bit of a pace. I'll be able to slow down a little bit. We've got Berkeley Square, which probably a lot of you may well have tried before. It's made by G&J Greenhalls in Warrington, but I think it's a really nice example of the more herbal sort of styles of gin. Some people talk about it as the more masculine one of their style, and the Bloom's the more feminine. But I mean, I think they're both very good products. I'm not particularly into that, this is gin for women, this is gin for men, because I think they're both very good. So, and my wife prefers Berkeley Square anyway, so there we go. So this is juniper, coriander, angelica, cuba berries. It has Thai lime leaves, basil, sage, and lavender. So you have some really herbal notes, but just to stop it getting sort of too savoury and too sort of earthy, you've got that lavender, which just sort of picks it up a little bit. It's a grain, it's neutral grain spirit, and it is, I think it's very good in Negroni, actually. It's something I like it in. And that's Berkeley Square, that's what the bottle looks like. Speaking to the distiller about this, and when we were doing a tasting with Bloom, one of the other things about this is it was designed to taste stronger than it is. So the bloom seems to taste about the sort of 40-ish mark. When I tasted this, I thought it was, when I didn't know what it was, I would have guessed it probably about 44 or 45, but it's not. But that is a very specific thing that they've done. They keep all of their gins at that same 40% level, but they try to make it seem that little bit more intense. Well, they do. I think they've done the job actually, by the way that they have balanced the botanicals. So it's interesting that there is definitely these two sort of levers with intensity and how strong something can seem. It's not just about pure alcohol by volume. It's not something that I scientifically really understand, but it's something that certainly from experience seems to be the case. So that is Berkeley Square, which I haven't tried any. This is the sort of thing, like in a Negroni or something like that, I think it works really nicely. Because you've got those really nice herbal notes. And there's some spice there as well, and the citrus comes through as well. Yes? Yeah.
When you do a tasting of whiskies, you take them down to about 20 ABV, and you'll never taste an Islay whiskey at the start because your olfactory system really gets clogged up with phenolics in there, and it's not much stronger. So when you're tasting gins off the bat, 6 in a row, and then you're asking for a comment on it, it's difficult because I in my own. Maybe it's really old, but I can't pick it up as quickly, and I think I get confused by so many different tastes and flavours. Consider taking it down to 20 ABV, or will you keep it at, when you're doing a gin tasting, would you keep it at 47, 44?
I like to keep it...
It's what it comes off the shelf at.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for a tasting I would prefer to do it off as it comes, as the distiller wants it to be, I think is my viewpoint. If you were doing something that was perhaps, and there's always a balance because we've got a large crowd here, so you've got to sort of have the balance between the two. If we were doing a more intimate thing where we had, 10 or 12 of us, then we'd have a different we'd have different glassware, and we'd have water, and we'd have a little bit longer to sort of, to sort of ponder over it. And ideally, I would, you'd have water in between, and maybe when your palate's a little bit fatigued, you might have some crackers or something. You'd take it more down the sort of as you would if you were doing a judging or something like that. But this is more, I suppose, just to get a snapshot. Although it's difficult, I suppose I'm just asking for essentially whether people like it or not. That's it's just very interesting to get feedback that's not just my own thoughts, because as a writer, as a reviewer of gin, there's always this danger that you just get lost in what you really like, and you have to be really clear about, I really like cardamom and I don't like cloves or something, but that's me, that's not what anyone else thinks. So this is another G&J Greenhalghs. It's another part of their range. So they've got their bloom one, which is the floral one. We've got thank you. We've got the lovely, thanks. The Berkeley Square is the herbal one. And then this one, which was John was talking about, is Ophir, which is their oriental spiced one. So it's the spicy style. There's quite a lot of spicy gins out there. Some are slightly sweeter spice, like that sort of Christmassy spice, and some are slightly drier spice, sort of curry spice. Darnley's View, their spiced one, I think, is on that more savoury spiced. The reason for choosing this one is I think it sits nicely in the middle. You get some sweet spice, you get some savoury spice, and I think that's quite nice to have. So again, neutral grain spirit. It's juniper, coriander, angelica, orange, grapefruit, cumin, cardamom, ginger, black peppercorns, and cuba berries. So, and I think what I quite like about it is the grapefruit. You get that quite early on. And so just before all the spice comes up. So it's not too... I think if you just had all those spices, it could be very, very dry and a bit dead. But I think the grapefruit just adds a little bit of life to it, which I quite like. And it's... The other thing is interesting is this idea of savoury cocktails is something that's still not really been explored that much. There are some. We've got the Red Snapper, Bloody Mary, you know, but beyond that, there's not a huge amount. But I think with gins like this, there's a lot more option for doing that sort of thing. So that's Ophir there. And again, at 40% again. Yep.
Do you feel the spices enhance the juniper or overwhelm it?
I think they make it a different style of gin. You can't say that it enhances the juniper.
Yeah,
if you're looking for
being a bit naughty. I can't smell any juniper
it's
at all.
fair enough. Yeah, it is. It's a big question. It's a question that should be discussed at some point because I think people have got very definitive views. It is a sort of curry style of gin. Yeah, I mean, I think that's to an extent that's the direction that it goes in, and it has certain applications, and for some cocktails and some drinks and some palates, people like it. I think it's an interesting point, and it was we brought it up a little bit earlier. Is that this sort of spirit potentially could appeal to some people that don't like the really traditional style of gins. I have a very wide range of what I like, but there are a lot of people that make styles that are a little bit, you know, away from the classic, that have people come up to them and say, well, I don't think I like gin, but I like your product. So there is this sort of, I mean, it's a topic in itself, but there is that other side where you're potentially bringing more people in, and then maybe gradually they're moving to appreciate more of the styles of the gin. So now we come to something a little bit different. We've got G-Vine, and which is made in France, but it also has a great base. And actually, even now, you can. Now, grape still, you know, it's all quite exotic, but you can. It's possible to buy grape neutral spirit in the UK now. Is that right, Charles? Yeah. So you can. So it is available now. So it's a bit more. Before, I believe that they have links to Ciroc vodka, and that's a great base vodka, and so that's sort of where they were getting it from. But now it's certainly a lot more of an option. I think it adds. There's a fruitiness that the grape spirit adds, and it also adds a slight roundness. There was a gin that I tasted in the US, which had both grain and grape, and the grain was to kind of bring, you know, I was talking about the canvas, was to kind of to bring that forward a little bit with the thank you, for the botanicals, but the grape was for the mouthfeel and for a little bit of the, I suppose, lusciousness of the spirit, which is perhaps a bit pretentious, but that's me. My description is a bit pretentious, not them. But it's made in Cognac in France, and the botanicals include, well, the botanicals are juniper, coriander, licorice, cassia, cardamom, cube of berries, nutmeg, ginger, lime, and a grapevine flower infusion. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but that is what I've been told on that. So you have a floral and fruit. I mean, it's very fruital, very floral, quite different. I think I get quite a lot of certainly when I'm tasting it now. And, you know, each time you taste it, sometimes, you're getting different things. I get quite a lot of the licorice coming through. I get that, quite a lot of the sweetness this time round. I don't think it is. I think the bottle has this green to it, but when you look at it on its own, it hasn't got any colour to it. That was part of my question. Also with G-Vine, one thing I must applaud them for is their innovation with gin and tonic paraphernalia, which I found quite interesting. Something a little bit different, but I think as for one gin, in terms of that sort of Spanish style or really innovating with gin tonic, G-Vine have done, I think, the most in the additions they've got. They have these rather interesting sort of like Kit Kat sort of sized ice cubes for your highballs. There's also these spherical sort of there you go, there's a good picture. These spherical ice bowls, which are good, you know, for your sort of tumblers or whatnot. And probably my favourite gadget that ever acquired, my favourite bit of bling or whatever you might call it, is this, which is this little doolie here, which is for the jumping gin and tonic serve, where you have a bottle of Fever Tree, or in Spain most of the Schweppes have the crown caps, and you pop it on the top and you press the button down, pierces a tiny little hole in it, and then with your coupe glass, you know, your big balloon glass, you have your tonic, you have your gin and your ice all in there, and then you can shake it and you can sort of shoot it this sort of distance to fire it in there. It works better with some gins than others because it's going to make the gin a little bit less well, as you can imagine, a bit less carbonated. But you can, it's theatrics, and it's kind of an interesting one. There you go. But yeah, so I think and they also had they did a little spray, like a little atomizer bottle, so you could potentially put some sort of liqueur. They do their own liqueur actually, so that you could spray that on the top. This is the Fluorescent that we've tasted. There is also the Nouvescent, which is in a silver bottle. Has the same botanicals, slight tweaks. It's a slight different ABV, slight tweaks to the botanical mix, not a huge amount. But tasting the two side by side is fascinating, just to show that even if you have the same botanicals, you can have a very different sort of spirit. Their spirit is a lot more of the sweet spice. It reminds me almost, if anyone ever remembered, the old Gordon's Distiller's Cup in the silver bottle. Reminds me a little bit of like that. Some of those spice elements are coming through. So, and then finally, we are on to the Kingsbury Victorian Vat Distiller's Cask, which is an aged gin, or now, there are a lot of sort of terms going around. You know, there's aged gin and there's barrel gin, and there's a lot in the US, and they're still trying to work out exactly what they want to call it because they have to deal with the TTB, with their labellings, and it causes some issues. Of course, the Hayman's one is Reserve, as is the Citadel, as is the Burroughs Reserve, the Beefeater one. Bombay Sapphire are calling theirs Amber, which is quite nice, and I think that sort of picks up from the old term, which was yellow gin, which seemed to be used quite a lot in the sort of 30s, 40s, and 50s. Kingsbury Amos talks about it, as does Dave Embury, and one of the most notable aged gins was the Booth's House of Lords, which is very nice, and it's one of the old bottles of gins that seems to consistently stay quite nicely in the bottle. But that's a sort of an aside point. But it was this idea of basically a gin that's had some sort of interaction with wood. And it's become a lot more popular in the US now. I think partly because a lot of the people that are making gin are making whiskey, so they're playing around with casks and stuff. So this is 47% ABV. It's for the thank you very much, for the Japanese market. It's got a slight sort of pale straw colour. So I think it's very much in that old style of the yellow gins. Seagram's as well, another very good example of a yellow gin which has been aged since 1929, which is when it was introduced. But in 2010 they stopped aging it. They never really spoke about it. They never even really said what it was. They called it golden gin and said it was mellowed, but they were never very explicit about what it was. But now they have got rid of that, but it's still the same colour and it still tastes very similar. So we're not quite sure exactly what they've done to change it. I think there's some sort of post infusion with juniper or something that's going on, but I don't actually know. It's only speculation. But yeah, so this is made. Oh, sorry, my apologies. I have the ABV wrong on this. This is 59.3. My card has 47 on it. My apologies. I must have been looking at a different bottle. Also 59.3. So now I'm not even sure if the rest of my details are right, but it's aged in whiskey barrels, I believe. And it has twice the juniper of the standard one. So that's when there's sort of two schools of thought for aging. One is that you just take whatever the gin is that you'd usually have, and then you just age it. And the other one is that you tweak the botanical mix or something like that to make it more conducive to aging, which is what some people have done. Maybe dial up the spice a bit, dial down the citrus a bit, but there are different options. Usually you'd probably up the ABV a bit anyway. So Has anyone tried much aged gin here? Does anyone like it? Think, aged gin, that's the stuff for me. Which one do you like?
This is the second one I've tried, and this is much superior to the first.
There you go. I won't ask what the first one was. Yeah, I think it's an exciting, it's an expanding and exciting area. I think gradually people will get to understand it a lot more. I quite like this sort of spirit. Particularly, I think this one I can imagine would be really nice from the freezer. I'm quite a big fan of sort of playing around with the temperatures, which was introduced to me by when Burroughs Reserve came out. But there's something about aged gin. When it's slightly chilled, it's a little bit more viscous. Typically a higher ABV, so it will get nice and viscous. It's just that little bit mellower, and it can just be really nice to enjoy on its own. And at the same time, it can work very nicely in drinks as well. So.